Hi, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Joseph Vermeille from Walden University, and I'm pleased to welcome you to a value proposition for adoption of cloud computing in higher education. For this presentation, we'll cover definition, pros and cons, conception, and timeline of cloud computing, cloud computing development and adoption challenges in higher education, research on cloud computing in higher education, cloud computing penetration and adoption in higher education, a cloud computing diffusion strategy for higher education, value proposition for cloud computing adoption in higher education. What is cloud computing? Cloud computing, as defined by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. This cloud model is composed of 5 essential characteristics, 3 service models, and 4 deployment models. The 5 characteristics are on-demand self-service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, measured service. What is cloud computing? The 3 service models, as provided by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, include software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. On the right hand side, we can identify software as a service being provided by Salesforce.com and Google Docs. We can identify platform as a service being provided by Google, and we can identify infrastructure as a service provided by Amazon and Eucalyptus. There are 4 deployment models of cloud computing: private, community, public, and hybrid. Pros and cons of cloud computing: scale and cost, encapsulated chain management, next generation architectures, especially compatibility with social networking venues, choice and agility. The cons: lock-in, reliability, lack of control, and security. Now we'll introduce a timeline of cloud computing. We started in the 1960s when John McCarthy and Lee Clyder started thinking of computation as a utility. In the 60s, John McCarthy wrote, "Computation may someday be organized as a public utility in terms of computing services as electricity." In 1997, the term cloud computing was first used by Professor Ramana Shilapa. In 1999, Salesforce.com was launched. 2001, autonomy computing emerged as a response to self-management needs. In 2006, Amazon offered web computing services, cloud computing to customers. 2007, research on cloud computing by IBM and Google. Salesforce.com launched during the same year. Launched on Force.com. 2008, Eucalyptus, an open API compatible platform, offered private cloud services. 2009, the National Science Foundation awarded $5 million for research in grants for research on cloud computing. We'll conclude with 2013. The cloud computing marketplace will reach $16 billion in terms of revenues. Precursors of cloud computing are client-server model architecture, grid computing, peer-to-peer, service-oriented computing, which, like cloud computing, the service-oriented version implements computing techniques leveraging software as a service. Drivers to cloud computing, key drivers and needs to cloud computing. We have identified maturity and growth of the internet, growth of data, server virtualization, efficiency, capital costs, scalability, storage, and backup. We have a cartoon here for you where someone said, "What a great idea to store everything in the cloud." And the wife said, "I'll start getting stuff down from the attic." The cloud is not for furniture. Cloud computing and higher education. Cloud computing adoption challenges in higher education. Major cloud computing adoption challenges in higher education identified are security, performance and availability, integration, cost, lock-in, reliability, lack of control, privacy, trust, compliance, and governance. On the right hand side of the screen, we see a picture, the picture of a paper from educos.edu, which has a 2-page executive brief on benefits, drawbacks, and risks of cloud computing for higher education. What campus leaders need to know about cloud computing is on the title of that paper. Research on cloud computing adoption in higher education. We propose here a few articles which we have reviewed in order to form our opinion and decision in preparing this presentation. We must emphasize that prior to 2008, we have not been able to locate any article with the term cloud computing. The first papers in this area started coming in 2008. For instance, an article entitled 3 Ways That Web-Based Computing Will Change Colleges and Challenge Them was written by Young Jr. in 2008. This is one of the earliest inquiries on cloud computing in higher education. The paper reports diffusion efforts by Google to promote cloud computing in higher education, with bus rides, on-site demo, and t-shirt distribution at participating colleges and universities. The key issues debated in that paper was sharing from everywhere, supercharging research, reshaping IT departments. Research on cloud computing adoption in higher education. That's slide 2. Another article, second article that we reviewed, again from the same author, Young. The paper is a short discussion on the newly released book, newly for that time, 2008, The Tower and the Cloud: Higher Education in the Age of Cloud Computing, a production of Educos, edited by Educos Vice President Richard Cass. The key themes debated or treated in that book were cloud computing in higher education, open source in higher education, social networking in higher education. Third article we reviewed was HP, Intel, and Yahoo team up on cloud computing. This paper reports a partnership effort between HP, Intel, and Yahoo with the Infocom Development Authority of Singapore, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany to create a global multi-data center open source testbed for the advancement of cloud computing research. The key themes and issues are cloud computing in higher education, open source in higher education, global and institutional collaboration in higher education. Fourth article we reviewed was eChells 2010, Preparing for a Clouded Computing Era. This paper claims that cloud computing is most certainly one of the most exciting innovations of the 21st century. It offers a definition of cloud computing as a movement toward internet-based computing and proposes 9 key benefits of cloud computing adoption. Those 9 key benefits are agility, cost reduction, independence, reliability, scalability, security, easier maintenance, metering, and multiple tenancy. Article number 5, Glasshouse Technologies. This paper claims that institutions of higher education have long been considered a hotbed of innovation and adoption. In the area of cloud computing, major concerns of privacy, security, and data integrity are all top of mind of university CIOs. It further reveals that to address these issues, academia has combined cutting-edge research and new tactics to identify the true benefits of this evolving technology. Through this work, educational institutions are now ready to move beyond the experimental phase into adoption. So the paper conclude that higher education, cloud computing is actually ripe for adoption by higher education. Kazman, article number 6 by Katzan. The title is The Educational Value of Cloud Computing. This paper argues that cloud computing is particularly attractive to small and medium-sized educational institutions because it represents a lower total cost of ownership than alternative modalities. And this is article number 7, that's mistitled here. Skiba, this article offers a series of definitions for cloud computing, such as the delivery of scalable IT resources over the internet, on-demand networking solutions involving computing power, computing infrastructure application, business processes to personal collaboration, which can be delivered to you as a service wherever and whenever you need it. Cloud computing adoption growth for SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, and BaaS. I'm not sure that BaaS, most likely business as a service. These days we can have everything as a service. I am thinking of classroom as a service. Anyway, to continue, we have the growth of these service models. From 2009 to 2012, SaaS went from 21% to 54%, IaaS from 8% to 35%, PaaS from 5% to 29%, and BPaaS, I don't know, from 6% to 24%. Anyway, my concern is SaaS, IaaS, and PaaS as per the National Institute of Standards. Here, this slide, which we downloaded from globalknowledgeblog.com, place cloud computing in the corner of Rogers' definition for early majority adopters. The trend is upward in cloud computing adoption. 39% of organizations are implementing or maintaining a cloud solution, up from 28% in 2011. And other information we have on different type of on the status of different organizations still show an upward situation in terms of adoption. Now, the state of how cloud computing in higher education. We have here a comparative report on the statistics for adoption of cloud computing for different kind of organizations. Those organizations include large business, higher education, small business, federal government, K-12 education, medium business, healthcare, state and local government. For 2011 and 2012, we found two big players in terms of adoption for cloud computing. Those big players are large business and higher education. In 2011, 37% of large business were adopting, were implementing or maintaining some kind of cloud projects. it went from 37% to 44%. For higher education, from 34% to 43%. And we find it interesting that K-12 has been very much active in adopting cloud computing. It went from 27% in 2011 to 42% in 2012. The lowest adopters, the slowest adopters in terms of of those institutions presented here was the slowest one was state and local government, and followed by healthcare. Here we have the different kind of software being ported to the cloud. We have messaging, conferencing, storage, office productivity. So these are the type of software in terms of percentage that's being migrated to the cloud environment. We welcome the people. 10% solution. This picture we've downloaded from mondovista.com. 10%. Well, when 10% of the people adopt an innovation, it is likely that the vast majority will follow suit. This is what we call the Vox Populi, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, the voice of God, and the voice is the voice of the people's voice is God's voice. And now we're going to introduce you to a diffusion strategy, a campaign strategy for adoption of cloud computing in higher education. That includes cloud computing adoption categories of higher education, potential change agents identified as early adopters, stakeholders identified as potential laggards, organizational adoption variables, 7 rules of a change agent to effect positive social change, defining the need for cloud computing in higher education, matching the need for cloud computing in higher education. Cloud computing adoption categories of higher education. Early majority adopters. That's where we believe that cloud higher education is stand in terms of adoption of cloud computing. At 40% cloud computing adoption rate in 2012, if we consider the first 2.5% and 13.5% as innovators and early adopters, we can safely classify higher education in the category of early majority adopters of cloud computing. So, and we can also relate that classification to Rogers 2003, which defined early majority adopters as those who embrace an innovation just before the average member of a system. Higher education is standing. Now, rationale for change. Persuading higher education as an early majority adopter requires an effective diffusion campaign using change agents. My selection of change agents in this case will be based on the following. First, a Forrester Consulting study commissioned by Microsoft Corporation reports that the effectiveness of change agents in adoption of cloud computing in the UK has been actually that report proved the effectiveness of their efforts in adoption of cloud computing. Number 2, Rogers 2003 argues that one main rule of change agent is to facilitate the flow of information from a change agency to an audience of clients. He further described change agent as possessing a high degree of expertise regarding the innovations that are being diffused. In this regard, we identify potential change agents as adopters. However, we have to identify. We have to set additional criteria for change agent selection. Number 1 such criteria is awareness and compatibility with Rogers' 7 rules of change agent effect to positive social change as outlined below. Number 1, to develop a need for change. Number 2, to establish an information exchange relationship. Number 3, to diagnose problems. Number 4, to create an intent to change in the client. Number 5, to translate an intent into action. Number 6, to stabilize adoption and prevent discontinuance. And number 7, to achieve a terminal relationship. And item 4 in our strategy, in defining the environment or the condition for change agent, we have identified the system as a top-down centralized environment education. So based on those criteria, we have identified the following people as change agents: the CIO, Chief Information Officer; the CFO, Chief Financial Officer; the CTO, Chief Technology Officer; Director of Teaching and Learning; Director of Student Systems; and the Academic Department Chairs. Well, we have included the Academic Department Chairs based on the study of Forrester, which finds that the drive for cloud computing continues to come from lines of business, not from IT. We consider academic department chairs as line of business, or the equivalence of line of business in academia. Potential change agents identified as laggards. We identified these personalities based on the nature of their proposition, which is more likely conservative and somewhat resistant to change. We identified the Assistant Vice President for Enterprise Application Platform, the Director of Compliance, Director of Quality Control, and the Director of Facilities and Management. Cloud computing hierarchy organizational variables. The variable we identified for higher education in this context are as follows: individual leader, characteristic identified as open to change; internal organizational characteristic identified as centralized in the hand of the executive leadership; and external characteristic and identified as flexible and open to outside influence. We'll now offer you a reflection on the selection of a champion for this project. As a result of the nature of the CIO's goal in terms of constant change management, higher education cannot have a better qualified personnel to play the role of champion for adoption of cloud computing. This selection meets Rogers' recommendation of the champion as a powerful individual with a high office in an organization, say a company president or vice president, or at least a top manager. Defining the need for cloud computing in higher education. Higher education needs the following. First, to reduce expenditures on traditional IT processes and reallocate the savings to further develop the teaching and learning agenda. Number 2, follow current best practice paradigm promoting adoption of cloud computing in order to focus on its teaching and learning mission. Number 3, meet flawlessly the demand for increased data processing and computing power. Number 4, accommodate and standardize bringing on-device policies and services for students, staff, and faculty. Number 5, leverage computing expenditures with computing consumption and needs while creating a reasonable playing field for critical skills. Setting the agenda for cloud computing adoption in higher education. Number 1, identification and selection of resources to migrate to the cloud. Those resources may include the data center, administrative and academic software, proprietary software development. Number 2, identification of the legal and compliance ramification for deploying certain resources. Number 3, conduct a related cost saving and performance analysis in performance gap analysis. Number 4, search the market for sound and reliable vendors currently providing the same service to other academic institutions. Number 5, nominate an ad hoc committee including identified change agents to perform as champions for implementation of this project. Matching cloud computing to higher education needs. Execution of this plan requires the creation of a new position which will be headed by a champion in order to match its feasibility and fitness with the organizational culture. From the ad hoc committee, we will select a proposed selection of a champion who will fill a new position of Director of Special Projects, reporting directly to the CIO, and whose duties will include A. To serve as a liaison between the executive team, the ad hoc committee, the PMO for Project Management Office, and the champion as a champion for this project. To monitor the implementation phase of the project in order to identify and correct potential pitfalls, problems, and anticipate benefits. To develop and keep timeline on the goals and status of the project. To conduct a campaign on campus, campus-wide to inform and reach the support for all stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, and the executive branch. And last, to mitigate and resolve conflict and incompatibilities. Now I'm ready, ladies and gentlemen, to offer you a value proposition for adoption of cloud computing in higher education. We have 10 reasons for you. Number 1 is cost. You pay less, and total cost of ownership is lower. Number 2, scalability. Pay as you go and pay as you go. Standardization and bring your own device capabilities. Flexibility. You can access your resources anytime and from anywhere. Encapsulated management. Maturity and growth of the internet as a sound, solid business environment. Continuing growth of data and increased demand for more processing power. If you don't join the cloud, you will have to provide response to those needs by yourself. Server virtualization, security, and deployment speed for applications. And we conclude this presentation on cloud computing for higher education by reminding the needs we have identified. This project will satisfy those needs. This project will enable saving on IT spending, will enable reallocation of savings to the teaching mission, or the saving to the teaching missions. And we conclude with this: if dollars and cents make sense for everybody, they definitely make sense, and a lot of sense is for higher education. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.